Andy had texted me before we began recording this podcast today, and he said, Brandon, I want to talk about the Browns because I got thoughts on them. So as we dive into our first topic here when it comes to the NFL free agency, of course, my hometown Cleveland Browns, not my favorite team, as you know, but I'm going to give you the opportunity here to dive into the Browns and what I would say is a relatively weird offseason.
Yes, definitely a weird offseason. And I was talking with some buddies about the state of the Browns, kind of thinking forward to next year, and it didn't feel like we got worse this offseason. We didn't really lose anybody. Anthony Walker, Sione Takitaki, but other than those two, I mean, I can't even think of guys that we lost other than, of course, Mr. Wonderful himself, Joseph Flacco. Um, but I was thinking, I was like, if everybody else around you is getting better and you're not getting better, doesn't that mean you're effectively getting worse? Um, the 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 Ravens are going in with a new loaded roster. The Steelers are definitely going in with a loaded roster. The Bengals are getting back Joe Burrow, and the Browns, they're not going to start the year with Nick Chubb. They bring in a guy in Jerry Jeudy who has not proven a single thing over his career, and you pay him. And then, of course, the biggest question mark, Deshaun Watson, hasn't played a full season for the Browns yet, and we're paying him $60 million a year. So,
So let me tell you, when the trade went down approximately 2 years ago, this week, when it first happened, I'm not gonna lie, I was ecstatic. I would have 100% made it at that time. Deshaun Watson was a top 10 quarterback in the league, even with the baggage that he had in Houston. And in my opinion, you just watched Baker Mayfield, and he wasn't going to get you over the to that promised land. And at that time, we knew the Browns were competing against Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson in that division. They had to make a move.
right.
Um, I think the Browns are in a weird spot because Deshaun Watson obviously has not been as good as I projected him to be in a orange and brown uniform. I don't think the Browns have particularly built the greatest offense around him. I mean, I like Amari Cooper, and we'll see what Jerry Jeudy can be. But really, outside of Njoku having a great year last year at tight end, there really hasn't been that second significant pass catcher in the Browns offense. And then
Mm,
defensively last year, well, I really liked what Jim Schwartz did with the defense, and especially when they were at home, they were historic, giving up, less than 10 points a game. But then for
right.
some reason on the road, and I spent a lot of time talking about it when we did our NFL recaps weekly during the season, giving up almost 30 points a game on the road compared to 10 at home was just jarring. And so
Right.
now you look at, you know, Burrow's come back for Cincinnati. I agree with you. I think even though that they lost Joe Mixon, I suspect that they will pick up a running back in the draft. I think Cincinnati will be just fine. They just got Trent Brown from New England, who's a very good left tackle.
Yep.
Baltimore, obviously, the addition of Derrick Henry, I think, helps the running game. What I'd be concerned a little bit if I was Baltimore was they watched one of their guards and then their tackle, Morgan Moses, they both went to the Jets. So, in that regard, I don't know how great their offensive line is going to be. And then Pittsburgh, like, listen, I think Russell Wilson will play well. I think he's going to do what he did in Denver last year, and that's for over 170 yards, have good stats, and have really no impact on the game. And Pittsburgh will find a way to win 9 or 10 games this year, like they always do. I think the biggest question for the Browns is going to be, you know, that home schedule. I don't know if you've seen it. I know that
Yeah.
the teams are not obviously announced yet in that order, but that schedule is absolutely brutal.
Yes.
You have to go through the AFC West, and then on the NFC side, going through the NFC East. And Philly, I think, is going to be better. Washington, I think, is going to be better. Dallas is always a very good regular season team.
Yes.
So it's a very tough schedule, and I think the Browns and Steelers, to be honest with you, are fighting for third place.
I've I've had the inkling that the Browns will be fighting for third and fourth place with either the Steelers or the Bengals. I know the Ravens they lost Zeitler. That's a big loss, right?
Yep.
But they haven't brought in, other than Zay Flowers, there's no one really else on that receiving core that I'm worried about.
Well,
But
and they lost Beckham as well.
right, he wasn't the biggest. He never really concerned me playing
No, but
against him.
but he was productive last year in that
Yeah,
offense, and then obviously, Likely came on midway through the year when Andrews went out. Um,
of course
I
he's coming back too, Andrews.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think in today's NFL, and there is that rare exception. Um, I think that if you have the best quarterback in your division, you're probably going to win your division. And
Right,
right now, personally, and I know he's been injured, and that's what gives me pause, but both of the top two quarterbacks in the division have been injured. I would take Burrow over Jackson, which is why I do think Cincinnati will win the division because I may be in the minority here. If I'm Cincinnati, I don't care what T. Higgins says. I'm telling him you are playing on the franchise tag, and I'm not trading you.
right. He was such a big piece of their offense last year.
So, okay, so we talked about Pittsburgh, and obviously they go out. They get Russell Wilson, but now they get Justin Fields. And I got to be honest with you, I'm going to take this from a Chicago Bears perspective here. I don't understand Chicago moving off Fields right now because while I wasn't a defender of Justin Fields, and I think they should absolutely take Caleb Williams, my argument was you're watching Mac Jones go for a 6th round pick.
Yeah.
You watch Kenny Pickett just go to the Eagles for a 4th round pick.
Hmm.
To me, Justin Fields is better than both those guys. You and I both know whether it's in preseason training camp or early in the season, one of the top quarterback names are going to go down for the season. At that point, Justin Fields could be worth a 2nd or a 3rd round pick for a playoff needy team that just needs a quarterback for the season.
Yeah, that was the Browns last year. They settled for Joe Flacco. What would your alternative be? The Bears keep Fields and draft Caleb?
Yeah, I mean that's what I would have done was I would have drafted Caleb, I would have kept Fields, and I would have waited until somebody went down.
Yeah. Yeah, I what they get in return for Fields?
So they got a conditional 6, which
Oh,
will become a 4th if he plays more than 51% of the snaps, which
I
I
don't
was talking with
see
my
that
good
happen.
buddy Michael Reiner this week, which will air which already did air about a week ago. By the time this podcast will air, Michael's a huge Steelers fan, has been for years, and he and I agree on this. They're not going to play Fields unless he's absolutely necessary because they don't want to give Chicago a 4th round pick. They'd rather have Russell Wilson if it all works out. Maybe even have him play 2 years at a low minimum salary.
Right. And then the question is because this is the last year of Fields' contract.
So they had to pick up his 5th year option this year. He has this year, and then next year he could play on that option, which would be worth about 25 million.
That's a lot for a guy who's not, if they're not going to play him for a couple of games this year,
Yeah.
only for a couple of games, how can they justify paying 25 million to a guy who's going to sit on the bench?
Mhm.
So I don't. It's a weird situation, but I think for Pittsburgh, it's a good situation to be in. You have a seasoned vet coming in, a guy who knows how to win, who historically has won, who's had a bad couple of years, a couple of bad coaching staffs around him, Russell Wilson. Then you have a guy, Justin Fields, who can sit behind him and learn for a year. And then, from that point on, it's up to the Steelers. There's not going to be a shortage of new quarterbacks coming into the league, so it's not like it's a make or break season for them or do or die. They've got time. They've got a decently young team.
The one move I did not understand was they moved off of Deontay Johnson for
Yeah,
essentially Patrick Queen, who was a great linebacker with Baltimore, but it just told me, Pittsburgh's classic culture. Do you know the Steelers? I don't know if many people don't know this. It's one of those deep in the weed stats that only us sports gurus know by listening to all these sports shows all days and looking up information ourselves. The Steelers, as of currently constructed right here today, lead the NFL in money spent on just the defensive side of the ball by $30 million.
Hmm. I mean, it shows. When's the
Now,
last time
here's the other thing though. The Steelers also are second least in the NFL at spending money on the offensive side of the ball. Why
Interesting.
does that matter, in my opinion? It matters because the Steelers obviously have a defensive minded head coach in Mike Tomlin. And I don't know how much you've been listening to me or listening to this show. My viewers have probably got exhausted from hearing me and listening to me talk about this for the last 2 or 3 years. But I truly believe, and this is where the Browns do have an advantage, I think offensive coaches in this league, they get quarterbacks, they get offense, they can make the chicken salad out of chicken, you know what, with bad quarterback plays. And I just think that when you have a young quarterback like Pittsburgh is going to with Justin Fields, I think having an offensive minded coach that just understands the way the sport is going, that's why these young quarterbacks are succeeding because they get better coaching and they get weapons around them.
Right. How do you feel about Stefanski? Is he? I mean, he to me he seems like pretty neutral minded. I wouldn't. Maybe he leans a little bit offensive.
So Stefan, I mean, he's definitely an offensive minded coach. I mean, he calls the plays on offense. One of the reasons
Right.
why they got rid of Van Pelt this offseason. My thought on Stefanski, and I've been saying this now for the last year, is year one, he was obviously very good. And it got the Browns through COVID, but take that out because COVID was a mess. Nobody knew what the hell was going to happen in 2020. The last 2 years prior to this year, I thought Stefanski got really too cute with his
Yep.
play calling. But then this year, and I kept saying the same thing. The offense, it's a little bit more under center. It's less shotgun. It's more play action. It's not my cup of tea, but I cannot deny that Kevin Stefanski got the Browns 11 wins and to the playoffs with four quarterbacks and absolutely deserved to win his second coach of the year.
That's
But
where I was going next. You don't think he robbed D'Amico?
no, I don't, because I think if you make the playoffs in the tougher conference with four quarterbacks and two of them were PJ Walker and DTR, who really aren't NFL caliber quarterbacks, and one of them Joe Flacco, who looked like he was completely washed until he came back to Cleveland.
Right.
That is more impressive to me than what Houston did because I had Houston at about 7, 8 wins this year. I did not think Stroud was going to be this good this early, but I thought they were going to be a better team.
Right. Do you
Um,
what do you make of Stefanski's struggles with Watson? I mean, I know the numbers are there, right? Last year, Watson started, what was it, 5 games and went 4-1 or 5-1 in 6 games. I'm not sure exactly what it was, which on paper looks great, but if you're doing the eye test on that guy, he does not look comfortable in this Kevin
I
Stefanski
I
offense.
don't think their systems mesh together. I think Watson wants to go spread. I think Watson wants to go more shotgun, which is why, and I've been making this argument for the last couple years, and you kind of saw it this year. Like, I'm sorry he got injured, but I've been saying if you pay a quarterback 50 plus $1 million like the way the Browns were doing, me personally as a general manager, I would have explored trading Nick Chubb.
Yeah, but you know what that would have done to the fan base.
But see, this is the argument I've had, and this is why I like to bring Browns fans specific on this show, even though I am from the local Cleveland area. We really dive into all things national, but I think Browns fans have a very interesting perspective because Browns fans as a whole, and you can speak to this obviously, may be and probably are the most loyal fan base out of any professional sports team in any city in the country.
I think that's hard to debate. I mean, has there been a franchise that's seen as much misery and as much time as Cleveland Browns fans? I don't think so,
You
and I
you
think
can argue
that
the Detroit Lions, and now they're good. I
I
mean,
I mean,
so
and the Browns are good now too, but I mean,
but they're not at the Detroit level because I think
no,
Detroit has sustained success, and we don't know about the Browns.
they're
Um,
nowhere near Detroit level. Detroit, they came out this year with a Jared Goff, and they put up. what, the most wins they've had in probably 20
Yeah,
years.
I mean, Jared Goff played like a top 3 quarterback in his conference. But I want to get back to my point about Browns fans. The
Yeah,
fascinating thing about the Browns is what is this Browns franchise? I could argue historically known for always having. Despite their recent struggles at the position, the Browns have had multiple Hall of Fame kickers in their, storied history. Luke
yep,
Rose, Phil Dawson, obviously. But the other position
running
is
back.
running back, right? I mean, way, but obviously Jerome, obviously Jim Brown, who some people think is the goat in all of football, even over Tom Brady. If you talk to the old heads,
Yep.
um, you know, er, Ernest Biner, Eric Metcalf, even in our early 2000 days, Jamal Lewis was a very good productive back,
Peyton
and
Hillis, can't
Peyton
forget him.
Hillis. Yep, and now you have Chubb, and so why I say this because Browns fans are we always need a running back. We've been the running back franchise. It's 2024, and if you look at the teams, and again outside of San Francisco, because they have a quarterback who's Mr. Irrelevant, and they can afford to pay McCaffrey. But outside of San Francisco, name me the great Super Bowl team that had a great running back on their roster.
I've gone through this a lot with your brothers specifically, and you look back at Super Bowl champion teams the last 20 years and the running backs that they've put out at the position, and it's guys you walk past them on the street, you wouldn't even know who they were.
For sure. So I do want to ask you about this. So we look at the other quarterbacks coming out in this year's draft class: Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix. I think this could be an historically, quarterback first round class, or all six of those guys could come off the board in the first round. And we know
Yep.
two of them are going to work, two of them are going to be decent to servable starters or backups, and two of them are going to be complete bust. And
Mhm.
most of them are going to be based off fit. Do you have a liking or a theory on which quarterbacks outside of Caleb that you
Uh,
like, and then which ones that obviously you're not the biggest fan of?
so obviously, you can't. It's hard to say anything about Caleb because you can't argue against him. The things that he's done, the skill that he has. So you know, leaving him out of it, I it's tough because I know Drake May is high on a lot of people's lists. A lot of people project him to go two, if not two, he's going three. So he'll either be a Washington Commander or he'll be a New England Patriot, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think Drake May is the answer in the NFL.
And I agree with you.
I don't think he's going anywhere. He was a North Carolina ACC guy. Um, he just doesn't. I don't know. I don't know what it is about him. I
I said
put
he
him on
reminds me. I said he
Mitchell
reminds me a
Trubisky.
little bit of Mitch Trubisky, who went
Yes,
to North Carolina.
yes,
He reminds me also a little bit of Zach Wilson.
yes. I think Jaden Daniels is coming out pretty raw. I think he has a lot of potential. I remember towards the end of the college football season watching Michael Penix and thinking this guy's arm is something like Josh Allen. He's got an absolute cannon on him, but Penix, he's had his history of injury, and if we know anything about guys who are mobile and once they get into the NFL, you're taking hits that are way harder than college. You don't have as much flexibility. And if he's a guy that's going to come out and be injured for 4 or 5 games a year, that's a hard way to piece together a career. I do like Penix. His obvious biggest strength is his arm. I mean, he has an absolute cannon. JJ McCarthy is going to be a flop, an all-time flop. I give his ceiling Kirk Cousins, absolute ceiling, which I guess if you're drafting him in the first round, having Kirk Cousins, it's okay. But certainly not if I've seen stuff about the Vikings trading up for him. I don't know if he's a guy I'd trade up for. Um, he's a product of the Harbaugh offense, and Blake Corum definitely contributed a lot to his success. Who else do we have on the list? I mean,
Oh,
I guess I'd say my top guy besides Caleb would have to be Jaden. I just think he needs time in the NFL under somebody. Give him a few years. We might see something like Jordan Love out of him. Um,
so the one thing I'll push back on you when it comes to McCarthy, and I
okay,
don't know how I feel about McCarthy. I don't feel as strong as you about that he's going to be an all-time flop. I think it really does depend on where he lands. And
okay.
I think if he gets an offensive coach and a strong offensive mind, and there are two key specific places that I think he could go that would work for him. One of them, and I know that they are obviously reshaping the roster, but I think Denver, I think that's the type of quarterback that Sean Payton would like to groom and get his hands on. And he's a quarterback that has been through the hard coaching, obviously, with Harbaugh. He's a system guy. He runs the play the way it's run. It's exactly the way Sean Payton would want Drew Brees to do it. It's the way he wanted Russell Wilson to do it, and Russell Wilson just didn't work in that scheme. The other place is if he goes to Minnesota and he sits behind Darnold for even a couple games, even if Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, and Aaron Jones are your weapons, unless he is what you're saying was a total flop, I think that guy is going to be successful in the NFL. I think whoever goes to either one of those two places is going to be good.
I, watching McCarthy at Michigan, he made the throws that needed to be made, but that team was just so good around him and so well coached. It's hard when you get into those situations to really determine if this guy's going to be good on his own. Um, but I mean, yeah, if you spend the first year of your career throwing to Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, I mean, it's got to be pretty hard to fail, right?
And by the way, and I'm not comparing him to this guy, but what you just said about McCarthy and his stacked team, I don't know if you remember, that's what people were saying about Joe Burrow when he came out of LSU.
Yeah, yeah, that team was one of the best teams in history.
And obviously, and this is the thing. This is why CJ Stroud, completely turned around the Texans. If you get the quarterback and the coach right, it doesn't matter if you're. It really does. As much as we like to talk about, ownership is bad, this and that. It really doesn't matter. Cincinnati's been a tire fire for 50 years. They get Joe Burrow and they go to the Super Bowl 1 year after he's healthy. I
Yeah,
mean, it really is about quarterback, coach, weapons, a decent pass rusher, and then you can start talking to me about a corner, a linebacker, a running back. I have made the argument, Andy, and I want to see what you think about this. When you're building a football team, okay, obviously we know the first position you got to get is quarterback.
yep,
Could I make the argument second and third most important positions? Backup quarterback and kicker. You know how many games are decided by a non-football player that hasn't put the ball through the net?
yeah. So many. I mean, shoot, how many did the Browns have this year? How many games came down to the
4 or
final?
5 at least in a row.
Yeah, yeah. And just the missed extra points stack up. How many times? I mean, that game against the Jets 2 years ago,
Oh
Browns
yeah,
Jets opening
the
day at
Flacco
Browns
game.
Stadium. No, no,
Obviously,
yeah, the Flacco game.
recovering the onside kick, which is a joke now. And I know the NFL competition committee is going through, and I hope that they do that 4th and 15
Be
at your own
awesome.
35, where essentially you get one play. And if you convert it, you get to keep possession. Because the onside kick now is absolutely pointless. I mean, you're more likely to get it in Madden than you are in real life. But I mean, yeah, quarterback, backup quarterback, kicker, maybe an offensive lineman, left tackle, center, a weapon or two, receiver, tight end, then a pass rusher. And then again, you start getting into, well, do I want a corner or do I want a third receiver? That's why I
Yeah,
don't get all this arguing about, well, we don't have a great running back. We don't have a great linebacker. Guess what? I don't care because linebackers, safeties, and running backs don't win you games.
Right. I mean, it's no argument that the NFL quarterback is the most important position in all sports. That's and it would only make sense that backup quarterback would be close behind because it's the position, it's quarterback.
And by the way, as the NFL now, we've seen a lot more backup quarterbacks have to play, and it sounds like the NFL is going to be moving to 18 games here within the next season or two. You're going to see more quarterbacks hurt, and you're going to see even more importance on the backup quarterback.
Would you, if that happens, are they moving to a double bye week?
So I believe so, which I totally get the
I
NFL
like that.
schedule,
I
which
like it.
which we're gonna talk about at the very end of the podcast when we get to the NBA. But what the NFL is basically going to do is they're gonna push the season back 2 weeks because you're gonna get the extra game plus the extra bye. That will put the Super Bowl at President's Day weekend. And if the timeline is the same for free agency and the draft, the NFL will essentially not have an off season where people aren't talking about it if there is so already, and it will
Really,
completely destroy whatever hope the NBA has in their regular season.
I mean, it's brilliant. NFL from a marketing standpoint, yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, even now there's barely an off season for the fans.
I mean, there's that week before free agency, which will
Right,
now be eliminated if you push the season back.
right, right. You have free agency, tampering period, and now, I mean, what is it? Middle of March, and we're already talking about the draft. I mean, people have been talking about the draft for over a month now.
Yeah, we're talking draft, and obviously the draft in April, and then a very underrated part is 2 weeks after the draft is when the schedule gets released.
Right. And then you have, everybody starts reporting. When is that? June?
It depends on the team. If you have a new coach, some guys like to get rookies in, like voluntary minicamp at the end of June. But really, there is that 6 weeks from about the end of the schedule weeks to the beginning of July. That is when training camp starts. That's like the only down period in the NFL season.
But even then, that's huge. That's a huge media time. You have all the rookies coming in and signing their contracts. You have these new guys coming into the facility. Those guys are in there working out. You have, clips are coming from every team. They're posting their new guys and their new uniforms. So, I mean, they really do have a monopoly on the media market when it comes to the NFL.
Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.